Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Sportified. This is a podcast about sports, and I am your host Akash Rao. Today I'll be talking about three sports that I love: football, Formula One, and boxing. Let's dive straight into it with Formula One. So the Formula One season has been paused as we are in the mid-season break, and of course there have been a lot of rumors and rumblings about potential driver moves. So let's discuss about the season so far as well as which driver has gone where and where could other potential drivers go. So about the season so far, many people thought that after Red Bull's initial dominance that it would be a repeat of the last two seasons where Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez would be unstoppable in that Red Bull. However, it has been quite the opposite, as McLaren and Mercedes, the two British giants in the sport, have had some sort of mini resurgence to bring the fight to Red Bull. McLaren, especially, are quite close to them and could even end up winning the Constructors' Championship. Of course, Lando Norris is another potential underdog who could win the Drivers' Championship from under Max Verstappen's nose, but I highly doubt so, as we have seen throughout the season that he is not yet fully prepared to be a championship winning driver, as he often makes silly mistakes, which cost him or even the team. Let's move on to today's question of the day for the Formula One segment. Should Checo Perez lose his Red Bull seat? Well, my answer to that question is probably not. While Liam Lawson, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda all could do better in the seat, I do think that Red Bull right now need a bit of stability before they make a decision to change their driver next season. So while there are many people calling out Checo for his performances and asking Sergio Perez to be replaced in that Red Bull seat, I do think that Red Bull right now needs to focus on improving their car and getting it Checo closer to the top in order to win the Constructor Championship as well as the Drivers' Championship. Moving on to some driver moves that have already been completed, and I'll basically share my thoughts on them. So Esteban Ocon has moved to Haas, and personally, Esteban Ocon is someone I have some sort of a soft spot for, even though many people do hate him because he is apparently quite a terrible teammate. Nevertheless, I do feel that this is a good move, as Haas have been struggling to find a suitable partner for Ollie Bearman, who will be their driver next season, and they needed someone experienced to partner him up. While Magnussen has done somewhat decent in the Haas, I do think that a change could be good for them, and that Esteban Ocon should secure them some worthy points next season. And to the big one, Carlos Sainz has moved to Williams. This is particularly not really surprising, but I do think that many F1 fans did hold out some hope that Carlos Sainz would move to a bigger team like Red Bull or even Mercedes. However, only Williams seemed to have offered an attractive project to Sainz, and therefore he has signed off with them. While I do feel that the Ferrari man's performances has validated a bigger move, Williams are a good stepping stone for him to take his time and perhaps bring about a Williams resurgence before moving to a bigger team maybe in 25 or 2026 when the new engine regulations are in. So that's all for the Formula One section. Do know that I am a new fan, so I don't really know all the technical stuff about Formula One yet. But I will discuss Formula One more in the future episodes. But for now, as it's a mid-season break, there's not much to discuss about, and I hope you enjoyed that segment. Let's move on to football, a sport where I can certainly consider myself somewhat of an expert. The new season is starting, and as a Manchester United fan, I am very excited and have high expectations for the new Premier League season. Of course, many people are trying to put a down on it by saying that Manchester City will just end up winning it, regardless of how much the other competitors are strengthening themselves. But I do hold out some hope, as we have a lot of decent squads this season from Aston Villa, Newcastle United, Manchester United, and even Liverpool, even though they have not made any signings. We'll get on to that later, but first off, let us kick off this segment with the Premier League table predictions. I usually have this as an article on my blog on Medium. You can check that out through the author name Akash Rao. But I've saved this Premier League table predictions just for the podcast. So let's start from the bottom. In 20th, I put Leicester City. They are facing a point deduction, and I think that is one reason they will be in quite the jeopardy this season, and they should finish rock bottom due to these point deductions. Though I also think their squad is quite unprepared for the Premier League, and their manager as well, Steve Cooper, had tumultuous time at Nottingham Forest towards the end, and I think he made a grave mistake of betraying them by joining their rivals Leicester, and I think he will be sacked by December, and they'll bring in an inexperienced gamble of a manager to replace him, and I don't think it'll go down well, and they will get relegated. In 19th, I think Ipswich Town will suffer to do much other than play some attractive football. I think they will struggle to get points up on the board. They don't really have the squad depth or quality to compete in the Premier League, unfortunately, as of now. And while their manager is quite an upcoming talent, I do think Kieran McKenna alone is not enough to save Ipswich Town from the drop. In 18th, I have somewhat of a wild card pick, which is Brentford. Brentford are a good club to have in the Premier League. They're well run, quite sustainable. They do care about the fans and all. But unfortunately, I think their time is up in the Premier League. Thomas Frank is a very good manager, but I think he will struggle to keep this squad up in the Premier League. They have spunked cash on some guy named Igor Thiago from Club Brugge. Buying from the Belgian league is not really worked out well for Premier League clubs, and I think he'll be a huge waste of cash. He won't be a suitable Ivan Toney partner or Ivan Toney replacement. And if Ivan Toney does leave, they definitely will finish in the relegation spots. But even if Ivan Toney was there, he's not really been in a good patch of form in the Premier League, and I don't think he'll have what it takes to keep them up. And in 17th, barely missing out on relegation, I have Wolves. Gary O'Neill is someone I don't really rate very highly, even though the British media insist upon putting it up there with the likes of Eddie Howe, Kieran McKenna, etc. I do think he's slightly overrated, but he still is a decent manager. I don't think he'll get sacked this season. He might get sacked next season, depending on the performances and where Wolves finish. But I think they will narrowly miss out on relegation. They won't be that impressive, and they'll finish 17th. Of course, they have lost Pedro Neto as well, so they could get relegated, but I highly doubt so. I think they do have enough quality in the squad to beat out Brentford, Leicester City, and Ipswich Town. In 16th, I have Everton. Everton are a huge club, but again, they are facing point deductions for this season. And I think they will suffer through that. And while they will have somewhat a decent season where they should be finishing mid table, I do think they don't have enough quality to go beyond that. And because of the points deduction, they will end up in 16th. I also think that Sean Dyche's time at Everton is coming to a close, and they should be getting a new manager either this season or next season. So in 15th, we have Nottingham Forest. Nottingham Forest are a team I do have a soft spot for. I do think they're a team with a lot of history who could offer a lot in the Premier League, but I think they don't have enough quality when it comes to the midfield to finish higher than. But I do think they will play some a nice football under Nuno. A lot of people seem to underrate him after that horrible spell at Spurs, but I do think he has what it takes to possibly take Forest even higher. When I see the other teams, I don't really see how Nottingham Forest could beat them to a higher spot in the table. So in 14th, we have Southampton. The Saints are a team I do think deserve to be in the Premier League. They just feel like a Premier League club. So I think they will finish higher than 15th. Russell Martin is a superb manager. I think he is good enough to keep them up. And the squad is actually not that bad when you look at it. They are definitely not the best squad, but I do think they are worthy underdogs who will finish. And in 13th, we have Fulham. Fulham have had a somewhat middling transfer window. Not much done, but they do have the huge mega signing of Emil Smith Rowe. I think he will light the league upon fire. I think he'll be a huge contributor to Fulham, but I don't think they can finish higher than 13th as the club above them do have more talent and most importantly more squad depth. And in 12th, we have Brighton and Hove Albion. Given a few seasons ago, I definitely would have them like an underdog to finish top 10 or even finish in the European spots. But sadly, they have an inexperienced manager who's only 31 years old, which is quite crazy. And I think he will have a bit of a rough start, but they will finish a decent 12th to build upon next season. 11th, we have Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace finished the season quite strongly, finishing in 10th for the 23-24 season. And I think that they will have another decent season again. Palace usually finish somewhere around 12 to 14, so anything about that is should be considered good. They have lost Michael Olise, and a lot of people have been putting focus on that and thinking they will finish lower because of that. But I think they do have the quality as well as a superb coach in Oliver Glasner to keep them in the fight for top 10. In 10th, I have Bournemouth. They have a very good manager in Adoni Irola, and he has a decent squad to compete with. And if this was in any other season, I probably would have them higher. But unfortunately, the competition places in the top 10 are very high. So they will just barely finish top 10, but it will be a decent season for the Cherries. In ninth, I have Aston Villa. This might be quite shocking for some of you, but hear me out. Last season, with Champions League football and with the injury crisis, Newcastle fell off after finishing fourth. And I think that Aston Villa have better squad depth than them, but the competition is even higher this season. And I think they will actually go to the Champions League knockouts and make it to like the quarters, which will take a strain on the squad. And of course, like many people say, it is easier to achieve something, but it's harder to maintain it. So I think it will be very, very hard for Aston Villa to repeat what they did last season and finish in the top four. But I think ninth would be a decent finish for a squad which is competing in the Champions League for the first time. In eighth, we have Chelsea. To be completely honest, I have absolutely zero faith in this project. I think Chelsea are a team in crisis right now. They don't know what they're doing. They just keep spunking cash on random youngsters, and the number of signings they have made is absolutely mind blowing. But I do think they still have a decent core squad to finish in top 10. I don't think they'll have a super meltdown and finish out of the top 10 like they did a few seasons ago. They won't do much this season. They will finish a very average eighth for by their standards. I think Enzo Maresca will keep his job. I don't think they'll sack him because clearly he's a project manager. That is the only reason they got him in and sacked Mauricio Pochettino. And yeah, just another bang average season for Chelsea. In seventh, something which might piss off Chelsea fans is West Ham. West Ham are a club on the rise. They have made a very ambitious managerial signing in Julian Lopetegui, who is a former Real Madrid coach, by the way. And they have made multiple ambitious transfers from Nicholas Fulkrug, Somerville, Guido Rodriguez, and there are plenty more. So many that I probably can't remember all of them right now. And they do have a decent cost score from last season. If Paqueta remains untouched by the FA for his alleged crimes, I do think they will finish top seven and get Conference League football for next season, and that would be quite a good result for them. And maybe they could win again. Who knows? In sixth, we have Tottenham Hotspur. Of course, Ange Ball has been an attractive brand of football. A lot of people have been uh, interested in seeing how they perform and how they play. But I do think Tottenham simply don't have what it takes to compete with the rest of the squads this season. I think while they have made some decent signings here and there, and they do have a very good coach in Ange, as mentioned before, I don't think they will struggle a bit. And yeah, they will finish an okay sixth. They will probably want to finish higher, but the competition is really high for top five spots this season. In fifth, I think Liverpool finish, and this is because they have a new manager, a new system. It will take time to adapt, but they do have the quality to finish in the top five. And I think there will be five Champions League spots this season. So they will still qualify for the Champions League, which would be a success for them, given that they're having a new manager and that they have made absolutely zero signings this window. It is a very risky move to do so, but I still think the squad depth they currently have is sufficient to at least finish top five. I don't think they'll have a crazy meltdown like some other clubs have had when their big managers leave, but I do think it'll be a slight drop off in quality of football and in terms of where they finish in the league table. In fourth, I have Newcastle United. Newcastle have quietly had a decent window, signed Lloyd Kelly among others, and of course Eddie Howe's at the wheel, a very very highly rated manager, and rightly so. I think he's an exceptional manager, and he will guide them to fourth, especially with no European football as a distraction. They should finish fourth, and I think they might even win something. Maybe the Carabao Cup, maybe the FA Cup. Who knows? But this Newcastle team are a side on the rise, and I think they will sneak their way into fourth. In third, Manchester United. I do know I'm a United fan, and this is slightly biased. I think Ten Hag has cooked this window with the signings. A lot of people have that agenda against like he's just buying Ajax players, but I think he's fine. I think he has a certain style of play, and these players know what his style of play is. So I think it is a good thing that he's buying players from his former team. And I think Manchester United have what it takes to finish in the top four. A title race, I don't really think so, but I do think they have enough squad there now to finish in the top four, regardless of whether they have injury crisis or not. Last season, we are really crippled by the injury crisis, but I think these the two defensive signings made today, Matthias De Ligt and Mazraoui, are good improvements to the squad, and they will definitely help us finish top four. In second is Manchester City. This also might come as a shock or might come off as a bias take, but hear me out. Manchester City have been winning the league won the league 4 times in a row. That takes a toll on the squad, regardless of how good they have played. It would take a toll on the squad, and it might bring out some complacency. And of course, last season and the season before that, it was quite tight between City and Arsenal. And I think third time's a charm for Arsenal, and they'll finally beat Man City to the title. In first, obviously, I've mentioned is Arsenal. Arsenal are a squad on the rise. They are a young squad. They have the potential. They have a very good manager in Mikel Arteta. Even though I'm a United fan, I must give props to him. He has done well in the Arsenal job, and I do think he has what it takes to be a Premier League champion. I think he will lift the cup for Arsenal finally, and yeah, overall it will be a superb season of football in the Premier League. So today's question of the day for the football segment, there are other questions, but this is the main question. Is Chelsea spending going too far? I mentioned this earlier that Chelsea are just splashing the cash on whoever they find. Literally on any player they think has talent, they're going with it. They are just spending 20, 10, 15 big amounts of cash on unproven players, and the Chelsea fans will tell you like, oh, there's a loophole. They have big contracts, so the money split across the years. But honestly, I think it is time FFP has to come into play. The FA has to do some investigation. Surely this is not a sustainable way of spending, and I don't think it fits with the league's profit and sustainability rules. Maybe there is a legal loophole. I don't really know the technicalities on the legal side, but I do think as a football fan, seeing a club spend this much is a bit wild, and yeah, it has to be stopped. So my opinion on that question is yes, it has gone too far, and I'm not being salty. It's just facts. It's just how can is it doesn't make sense that they have been allowed to spend that much without consequences. Even Manchester City have not been so unbrazen in their spending. Another question which I wanted to discuss is the Premier League washed? Is it become a farmers league? Because a lot of people have brought up that point on social media because uh of course Manchester City have won the league 4 times in a row now. So that has been something that has been out for debate of late. But I highly doubt that is true because the Premier League is the most competitive league in the world. There are a lot of the mid-table clubs making their rise into the Champions League, such as Aston Villa, Newcastle in the last 2 seasons. And I think there will be more clubs pipping huge traditional top six clubs to the top six spots in the future and this season. So I highly doubt that what the general consensus online is true. Of course, that does mean the Premier League fans have to stop being hypocritical and calling other leagues washed just because their league has a team that consistently wins it every year. Just because there is the same winner does not mean the positions 2 to 20, or in the case of Bundesliga, 2 to 18, are uncompetitive. There is a big dogfight for the top four in the Premier League, the top six or top seven maybe also. And I do think this season is going to be even closer. So no, the Premier League is not washed. And now moving on to boxing. So this will be the final segment for the day. Of course, it's the first episode, so I'm trying to keep it short and sweet. Just introduce you to how the podcast will be and warm you guys up for future huge episodes with potential guests and yeah, other exciting things coming out. So enough waffle. Let's go straight into the boxing segment. So again, this requires a disclaimer. I am a new boxing fan, so please don't flame me if I say something completely outrageous. I am quite new. I do understand a lot of the terms and techniques and all that stuff, and I don't really consider myself a casual, but at the same time, I get something wrong, do forgive me. I'm learning on the job. In terms of traditional boxing, let's talk about that Virgil Ortiz Jr. fight. So they fought quite recently, last Saturday actually, and a lot of people were saying it is the fight of the year. So I had to go and check it out. I checked out the highlights, and my oh my, it was a crazy fight. There was such a high volume of punches, which is something I've not really seen in professional boxing in my time as a fan. So that was something exciting. And of course, a lot of people were debating whether Virgil Ortiz deserved to win over the other boxer. I don't want to say his name because I'm scared I'm going to mispronounce it. But yeah, he's from Ukraine. He was an up and coming boxer. But of course, Virgil Ortiz is the bigger name. And yeah, I do think he won from what I saw. But I could be wrong because, of course, while watching live, a lot of people felt that it was closer than the judges made it seem. But yeah, I do think that it was a very good fight, and these fights should happen. It was not that popularized, like, I didn't know it was happening. But yeah, they should do more promotion for these kind of fights because it was a very high level of boxing and high level, high volume, and very exciting. And this is the kind of boxing fights that gets other sports fans or casuals more interested in the sport. If we get like the boring snooze fest, like I don't want to really call out the pound for pound number two, but the Terence Crawford fight, it was kind of boring. Even the highlights are a mid at best. If you only promote those, a lot of people would think that boxing is boring and all that kind of stuff. So I do think these kind of fights need to be uh, more promoted by traditional boxing fans rather than gatekeeping or that kind of stuff. So let's move on to a subsect of boxing, which is Misfit 16. Uh, if you guys didn't know, I am a huge influencer boxing fan. Sorry if that pissed off the regular boxing fans, but yeah, I do like influencer boxing, and not just KSI fights. I do follow the Misfits, and also before they went defunct, the Kingpin fights. Misfit 16 happened this weekend as well, and I was considering watching it live, but this card was kind of dry, so I decided to just wait for the highlights. And yeah, it was an exciting card, surprisingly, despite the lack of huge big names. And I feel that Misfits are having somewhat of a dry period right now, but this was a good kickstart to the maybe resurgence of influencer boxing, because a lot of people online are saying influencer boxing is dying and all that stuff. But I personally think otherwise, and it is related to my question of the day for boxing later, but we'll get to that later. So let's talk about Mystery 16 first. So Josh Buckner in the main event won against Fifth Temple to kick off the cruise. Oh, actually no, it's the second fight of the cruiserweight tournament. But basically, he went on to the next round. It was, as from what highlights, I can see that maybe the skill level wasn't that high, but I could see the talent on show. A lot of good shots, huge power from both guys. But of course, Face Temple lost, which is a big thing because that is the third time he's been dropped in like 18 months. Surely that's not good for his head. He should be retiring. He doesn't want CTE. He just became a father. Yeah, so unfortunately, I think this should be the end of Freak Temple's career. If he does come back, good for him, I guess, but I don't really think boxing is his thing. He has a very bad habit of keeping his chin in the air. So it's like basically it's a moving target for anyone to hit. And Josh Buckner managed to hit it. Josh Buckner, on the other hand, impressed me a lot. There is raw talent there, you can see it. And the technique wasn't the greatest, but it is a fight between two heavy guys, and generally the technique goes down as the weight goes up. But I do think he showed some impressive technique in the knockdowns. The framing was good, and of course, the first knockdown is a bit controversial. Like, is that an elbow? Personally, from what I saw, the first time I saw the highlights itself, I could tell it's not an elbow. It is just a follow through. The thing about it is which part of Bruckner's punch made Temper drop to the floor. Was it the initial contact, which is the punch? You can clearly see there is a punch, which kind of made Temper's head twist, or was it the elbow, which is like not really to the chin or to the jaw, but more to the neck? I personally think it was a punch. It was not really a clean punch, but it did hit him square on the chin. And Tempo was going in for the clinch, so he was falling towards Bruckner and into the elbow. So I don't really think it is fair to penalize Josh Bruckner for that punch. I think that's more of a temper's carelessness in not looking out for the left hook before clinching. So yeah, I do think that that knockdown was legal. So moving on to Misfit 17. Of course, it is being surrounded by controversy that KSI pulled out against in the 2v1 fight. In the first place, it wasn't that popular, the concept of 2v1 fight. So I'm not really sure why a lot of people are like disappointed still. I mean, I get it. Like if you did buy a ticket, of course you would be disappointed if you are not able to see KSI, but he is performing, so that is quite exciting. Online, a lot of people have been hypocritical, I guess, that he's pulling out, you know, but I think it's fine. Of course, the rest of the card is not that appealing other than Danny Aaron's fight. But I do think Gabriel Silva fighting on there is exciting as well. The rest of the card is a bit dry, so I do hope that they add Anthony Taylor to it. So yeah, the question here on my sheet was, is Misfit 17 a good card? I would say not really now that KSI is off. So moving on to today's question of the day for boxing, or the boxing segment, which is, should Misfit continue without KSI? And the second part of the question is, should influencer boxing even be a thing? So let's start off with the first one. I think, yeah, Misfits Boxing has been somewhat of a success in the influencer boxing scene. I think they're the most consistent promotion in the influencer boxing scene, and they do have a number of stars other than KSI, like King Kenny, Salt Papi, Slim, Anthony Taylor, who have all done well for themselves. A lot of them have a high level of boxing. And I do think that, yeah, Misfits Boxing do have a future without KSI, especially since it has been reported that KSI is showing a lack of interest in boxing, and he has like a few fights left in his career before he retires. And I do think that, of course, they will have to find a new pay-per-view star to replace someone of KSI's level. Maybe I should speed, maybe Danny Aaron, who knows. But regardless, I do think that it is a decent concept. The cars are safely run for the most part. They're well organized. Uh, they're properly arranged, and like not too many mismatches. So I do think that uh, Misfits does have a future without KSI and should continue. And secondly, should influencer boxing even be a thing? A lot of regular boxing fans don't really like the concept. They think it's like a joke or like a mime of proper boxing. But I do think that influencer boxing does deserve its props. It is entertaining. Cards like the Prime card have been super, super entertaining. And there has been high level of boxing. Not all influencer boxers just want to sort out beef in the ring. Some of them really want to like formulate a career in influencer boxing, and yeah, I do think that influencer boxing does have its merits. Of course, you can't compare the two sports as one sport. It is quite different. Influencer boxing is not at the same level as regular boxing, or even MMA, or even WWE. But I do think that influencer boxing does have its merits, and even though a lot of people are saying it's dying, have been criticizing it, as I mentioned before, I do think that influencer boxing has been an entertaining subset of boxing, and yeah, it should continue. I don't think it's anything too dangerous or unsafe for influencers, because as I said before, Misfits have organized some pretty good shows, and they do everything to the T. They don't really take shortcuts and compromise fighter safety. So I think as long as that remains the case, influencer boxing should continue. With that being said, we are done with this episode. Do let me know what else you guys want me to talk about. This is quite a short episode because I am just testing the waters and seeing, how the reception is for this kind of podcast. Apologies if I talk too fast, or the audio quality is not that great. I am trying things out with different systems and all that. So do give me feedback on that as well. But yeah, this has been the first episode of Spotify. Do check out our Instagram, Sportified Podcast, and I hope to see you soon. All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.